So I don't know about you, but as I get older, I'm finding out that relationships are not the rom-coms of the 90s I was promised they would be. There's no chance meet cutes that end with a passionate kiss at the top of the Empire State Building. But what is more likely is that I will run into my ex with his bouncy new girlfriend in head to toe Lululemon while I am wearing last night's mascara and my favorite Target sweats from 2002 that I am clinging to like a security blanket. I think that failure is a common thread in relationships of any kind. It can often feel like something is off even when you're in the middle of one. So that's why we're here today. We're going to talk about relationships, failures, and what it means to learn from these mistakes that as humans, we all make. So welcome to the relationship episode. Today, we are going to be talking about relationships with a dear friend of mine, Meghan Williams. I met Meghan in 1992 when I lived in Bedford, Texas, and we reunited through mutual friends a few years ago. Meghan is a meditation teacher, a yoga instructor, an aspiring harpist, a corporate America survivor, and a longtime professional writer. She resides in one of my very favorite cities, Austin, Texas. Most importantly, she is a magical, thoughtful, and just lovely human being. I am honored to call my friend. Over the years, she and I have shared many of the same experiences, horror stories, hilarity, and definitely failures in our relationships. So, Meghan, welcome to Free Failing. Thanks for talking to me today.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, can I just take you around with me everywhere I go and have you introduce me when I walk into anywhere?
Just like a narrator for your whole world.
Yeah, well, and it was funny because my mom got surgery not too long ago, and we were actually in the surgery center, and the doctor got there, and they announced it over the PA, or Dr. Hayes just arrived, so she came over to us, so we were genuinely just curious. What does it feel like to be announced like that?
Right.
So,
Right. Like everywhere. So I guess let's start with if you had to summarize your first big relationship, right, to how you got here, anything pertinent in between, or to whatever degree you're comfortable talking about, what would that look like in a summary?
so I actually have the perfect answer for this. This came to me, this came to me I don't know, maybe, gosh, it was probably 10 years ago. And I was sitting there and I was talking to my cousin and we were talking about relationships. And I had just got through one of my major doozies. And when she was talking to me, my mind just started going off on its own little tangent. And it just created this montage of me in relationship history. And it was me from beginning of relationship to present in all these different decades, wearing all these different clothes in all these phases of time. And every single time I was just going, what?
Right.
Because I get into it and I feel like I have it all figured out. I feel like I do all the right things. I feel like I show up. Well, I felt like I show up. I can look back now on my younger self and say I wasn't showing up the best way I could.
Right.
But in all those times I thought I did. And some of the ridiculousness that ensued as a result of me giving what I thought was my best just constantly made me feel like I was getting punked or something.
Such a good way to describe it. So my default tends to just be long-term relationships, as I've learned. So I was 16 to 21, 22 to 27, and then short break, and then 32 to however old I am now, which is 44. Mm-hmm. I don't really know why that became my default. I'm sure there's some childhood / attachment style / codependency that could all be discussed probably on another episode. But for whatever reason, that's just the way that it worked. And I think the thing you and I mainly differ about, so I don't know how much dating, casual dating you've done, but I don't really have any. I can count on one hand the number of actual just like random dates,
Mhm.
like Matched on whatever that I've been on. But I agree with you about the like kind of like what happened. Except just like you said, now being older,
Mhm.
it's hard to be in that space because it's very obvious what happened because I'm mostly a different, like a pretty different, my patterns are a lot different in relationships now, obviously, than they were when I was 25.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I also think too that the more self awareness you gain through all the work that you do and whatever your modality is with therapy or reading or podcasts or talking to other individuals, it becomes evident that you are making these subconscious choices for the people that you're picking based on challenges that you're trying to work through from your own issues in your own formative years, right? I mean, I can
right.
definitely say that a lot of the people that I chose in my past were people that I would not have chosen now, knowing the natural tendencies that I lean into as a result of some of the maladaptive behaviors that I derived from my formative upbringing.
Right. Like, I didn't exactly know how vulnerable I was going to get with my relationship conversations, but in the three that I mentioned, the middle one was like highly abusive.
Mhm.
And anyone who's done any reading or known anyone or read or whatever, it's always the same question like, "Oh, why did you stay?" You know?
Yeah.
And it's like you said, just I didn't have that self-awareness yet or like the knowledge that I was staying in something that I thought I deserved. Like I just thought that's what my
It's
like
familiar.
right. And the thing about like if you're treated badly or not even treated badly, let's just say that there's some like emotional neglect maybe in your home or one of the parents is missing, as was in my case, and you don't get that, then you look almost for that same level of neglect or chaos in your, especially during like formative years, right? I was 22 when I met that partner. And like even the negative attention and the negative reinforcement, while terrible, was filling some kind of void though. So, um, a lot, a lot of my future therapy would be a result of that relationship because nobody asked, "Why did you stay?" more than me. Once I got out of it, it was like, "Oh my god, like, holy like, wow," like, that wasn't just a couple of bad arguments where people got angry, that was like a really actual abusive relationship, so I that was probably my biggest learned experience as far as, getting into self-worth and stuff like that and, like, what you bring from your childhood and whatnot.
Mhm. Yeah, I relate to that. I feel like one of my primary caregivers, my father had a certain kind of lots of very colorful dysfunctions, I'll just say. And so there tended to be this pattern in my relationship history that I would be drawn to these same types of individuals. And
Mhm.
I mean, I can honestly say, looking back on all of these relationships that I'm thinking about, I don't remember ever once feeling safe or secure or loved or valued or even seen
Right,
at a
yeah,
basic level, even seen. But that was so
right,
normal for me because that's what I was used to growing up from the men in my life, right? The
right,
man in my
right,
life.
right, right, right,
It was just such a vicious cycle. I picked these people that were going to basically re-victimize me because I was choosing to re-victimize myself. And then I get re-victimized and not understand how it happened, how it turned out this way.
right,
Which
right.
now looking back on it, I mean, there's so many conversations that I would have with my younger self about this
Me too.
when I was kind of flying blind, and I just had no idea what I was doing.
It's so interesting too, like, I think because of what you said, like, in my case, it was absence, but I did have step parents, so there was, like, sometimes a caregiver, and sometimes not, and if I could go back and tell I love this whole narrative about talking to your younger self so much, especially lately and getting into like reparenting and stuff. It's like, hey, you don't have to have a partner.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to have a partner. You can just be with your roommates or your friends or whatever it is. I think it's like some attachment wound. I'm not entirely as familiar with the attachment styles I know as you are,
Mhm.
but I feel like my need to be in relationship to relationship to relationship with very short breaks in between has to do with just this universal, for me, fear of just like, what's gonna happen if I'm by myself? Like,
Yeah.
am I just gonna be
Yeah.
terrified and lonely? And who's gonna kill spiders? And what about I'm only gonna have one income or whatever it is, like, like
That is the paramount question in my mind.
like,
um,
just all the things that come from even in a bad partnership,
yeah.
someone else can kill a spider, you know what I mean?
Well, and
Um,
more so than that, I think that there's this collective need in our consciousness for us to be externally validated.
right.
There is
Totally.
nothing in our upbringing. There is nothing in our school system. There is nothing in society in general that teaches us how to be self regulated.
Right.
That's something you learn accidentally through pain and hardship and therapy.
Totally, totally. I love that. I just heard something on like a parenting podcast or something, which I don't have kids, but I listen to because I'm like reparenting, right, myself. So a lot of the advice that my friends are using for their 9-year-olds applies to me right now as a middle-aged adult. But I heard something and it was like, consider instead of telling your child, "Hey, I'm really proud of you," consider saying, "Hey, like, you worked really hard on that. You should be really proud of yourself." And
Yes.
I was like, "Oh my
Yes.
gosh," right, because
In turn, it flips the
internal validation, right, like, I'm doing it because I wanna be proud.
yeah,
That's enough.
yeah.
Just because I feel proud of it, that's enough. I don't need anybody else to of course, you, like, want your parents and all that stuff, but I thought that was a really interesting, like you said, like a foundation that just doesn't really exist in
And it's great.
it doesn't.
I mean, we have an entire school system that gives you knowledge of everything but the knower. And that to
Right.
me is the most asinine thing I've ever heard of in my entire life. I mean, to have a system where we send our children, the most beloved things in our lives, to get brainwashed into this idea that their self regulation is dependent upon external validation.
Right.
Crazy.
Like the gold star system or the I mean, I don't know how school works now because I haven't been in obviously, our friends all have kids, so we hear, like, kinda how it works. I think it's mostly the same.
I think so.
Um,
Yeah.
I think so, yeah, and, like, I will say in some of the parenting podcasts or readings or whatever, sports is, like, supposed to be a really good, like, self-validating thing because you're like a active participant in this group success,
Yeah.
right? Like, without you, the whole unit doesn't work as cohesively, and I think that for kids, that's really validating.
I
That's
think
just
that's great. Yeah.
yeah, like and I think that that helps, like, build confidence too, like, with your teammates, and then and it also teaches you about failure, right? Like, it's like both ends of the spectrum, like, "Hey, you don't always win.
Yeah.
It feels bad. It's okay that it feels bad.
It's okay. Yeah. It's okay that it feels bad.
It
Exactly.
feels bad." Yeah, so,
Well, and I
uh
also think too, and this is where I commend our girlfriends so much for the way they're raising
right.
their children, is there's all this awareness now around mental health, which was just not
Right.
there when we were younger at all,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
100%.
if I had a voice for my anxiety when I was younger, I feel like things would have been so different for me because just constantly being an anxious child and always feeling that internal dysregulation and not having any way to express it, all you're left to do is internalize it.
Right.
And, nowadays, like our girlfriends, just being able to say, I have FOMO, like that's such a big deal. Just name it. What is it? Give it a voice.
Right.
I
Right.
so great that parents this day and age are putting this emphasis on mental health because it is so important.
It is. I totally agree. I was a very sensitive child. I'm a very sensitive adult. I was a very sensitive adolescent. That's kind of the theme of my personality. And there's a lot of pros and cons there, right? It comes with, you feel all the lows extra bad, but you're like, "Oh my god, I'm crying at this sunset," whatever.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
Works for you and it works against you.
exactly. Growing up, like, I didn't know that that was why I started kinda acting out or whatever, and it was just because I had all of this angst, and I mean, there were other reasons too. A lot of my needs, like, were not being met, like, mostly emotionally.
Mhm.
But yeah, I did have a lot of, like, sensitivities that were coming out as just, like, giant, big, massive feelings that my caregiver was like, "Whoa," like, I'm the middle child, so, like, "This is not how the first one was. What's going on?" Like, "She was quiet and stayed in her room for 10 years. What's happening?" So but yeah, I do think that that all shows up in relationships and as patterns, and that's, like, I'm really trying hard with, like, okay, I was just in this very long relationship as I am currently in the middle of it probably dissolving. It feels a little weird to, like, put a concrete yes or no on it just because it has been a 12-year situation.
Mhm.
But yeah, there was all the therapy and individual and couples and trying and not trying and trying again, and it brought up a lot. And one of the things that I kept going back to that I have to tell you, like, I still kinda go back to is like, well, this is such a normal person. I don't know if you've ever had this thought before, but, like, oh my gosh, like, he has, like, all is so smart and went to college and, like, kind of all of maybe the things that I feel I'm deficient in, like, I sort of admire that he has. I don't really know if that's healthy or not. Saying it out loud doesn't sound real healthy, but, like, what happened is I had a lot of, like, have a lot of respect for him, and that made and is making dissolving the relationship very hard because if you're looking at us side by side and somebody who came from the kind of upbringing that I came from, and his was like no picnic either, but more stable, right? It's hard not to interject my own patterns as like the fault, right? Like the problem.
Sure.
But I think everybody does that. Even maybe he does that. Who knows? I mean,
Well, and I think
um,
it's kind of this, I almost feel like it's this subconscious thing that we do, again, based on this whole need for external completion, right? I mean,
right.
society kind of puts this whole idea around relationships as this very rom-com, you complete me, together we are whole, right? And so I think based on that being in our just sort of psychological DNA, we look at where we fall short in ourselves and we find someone to sort of fill in those missing puzzle pieces. And so when
Right.
that person mirrors back to us, that reflection together, it feels whole to us. Like, oh, I didn't do this, but they did this. I'm deficient in this way, but they have it. And together we are a whole person versus actually just creating that wholeness inside us from the inside out. And so then when you dissolve something like that, you're losing all these pieces of yourself that with this person seemed like they were exactly the way they were supposed to be. Oh, well, we went to college, we did this. And now without that person, you're back to those voids that you perceive in your own
Right.
reflection.
It's just me and my own negative self talk over here
Yeah,
now. There's no, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, totally. I always really at first I was like in the very beginning, like when we first started dating, I was like, "Are we maybe too different?" Like, I'm very, like, oh my God, stop the car. There's a rainbow, like very just like, you know,
And I love that about you, by the way.
thank you. And I mean, he did too, even when he was like, what is there? Oh my God, you scared the crap out of me, whatever it is, like thought we were getting in an accident, whatever. But so I used to think that there was a lot of like pros to the, let's call it the opposites attract, for lack of a better.
Yeah.
And then we went to therapy one time, and I remember telling the therapist, like, I have like XYZ traits and he doesn't. And I'm concerned that without those, it's not going to work out. And this is one of my favorite things that I ever got from therapy. But he said, you're not dating yourself.
Mhm.
It wouldn't work if you were. And I was like, oh man. I mean, I know. I know, but I always took that with me. That was always really important to me to remember, like, because that's when expectations start getting, like, as they say, expectation is the root of all disappointment. And so if your expectation is to be loved the way that you love, or give gifts or surprises or plan things or whatever the thing may be that you do that you think you do really well,
Mhm.
and you expect in return, it's not going to work out that way.
Right. Which is hard because that's your frame of reference,
Right.
It's hard.
And rom-coms.
Yeah. 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 But I mean, I feel like that is one of the biggest challenges in relationship is learning how to reframe their behavior just because it's not corresponding with how you would do it.
Right.
You and I are a lot of the same in the sense
Right.
that we're very attentive. We ask questions, we remember things. And when our partner doesn't do that, I think it naturally just feels disappointing because
Right.
that is your natural frame of reference. And there's an element of you love the way that you love them, right? It's like
Right.
there's some internal satisfaction and gratitude that comes from being able to love to that capacity. But then it creates this desire to have it reciprocated.
It does. And I think that's natural too. And, that's what every relationship book and therapist will tell you is, if you want a healthy relationship, make sure that you can accept the person entirely the way that they are right now. Not, oh, if X just tweaked a little bit, Y would be so much better. There's room for growth for everyone, but everyone has to want their own growth.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So if the person you're with right now is like, well, this is just the way I am, I'm just going to be like this for the next 30 years, like, okay, well, that probably indicates like a lack of desire to
Right.
grow and be curious about themselves. And that could be a red flag if you're somebody who's extremely curious about yourself and your patterns and trying to make more self-aware decisions moving forward. So,
And now, don't you think it would just be so great if everybody could just take their ego out of it, and you find
oh my gosh.
two and you come together and you're like, okay, what's your definition of love and happiness? Okay, here's mine. So here's where we sort of don't connect. How can we work on this to make this maximum enjoyment for both of us?
Yes.
Versus getting so prideful and getting so, personalizing everything and seeing it as, someone is telling you there's something wrong with you or it's a fault in some way.
Right, because isn't that how it's often heard?
Ah,
I have
I think.
always, like, and that's where defensiveness comes in, and then people just start shutting down in the conversation. Once you're defensive, you can't, and that's like if the ego was removed, there would be no defensiveness
They were
because
done.
it would just be heard. And yes, I have had that same conversation on both sides of the spectrum, and I'm sure you have as well, with partners who you are saying, "Here are my needs.
Mhm.
Here are my needs. Here they are. I'm gonna try to ask for them in the most like gentle, eloquent way I know how.
Mhm.
And here they are. And the response is, oh, so you're disappointed in me, or I'm not good enough, or
Yeah, always.
you're attacking me, or whatever the things are. And it's a struggle.
It
It's a
is,
struggle.
and I think it's just this it's almost there's so much of it that we don't have a lot of control over unless we have the level of awareness that allows us to, because we always try to resolve our formative issues in our romantic partnerships. That's just kind of how it works. And so there are so many things about being in romantic partnership that push you back into that small self.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
Right.
That small self does not have discernment. Like that small self, when it's activated, cannot depersonalize. It's
Right.
absolutely
No,
impossible.
it is.
And so there's so much about that becomes tricky when you're trying to communicate your needs with someone, who's in small defensive self. It's impossible for them to hear anything other than I'm not doing this right. There's something wrong with me. I'm not worthy of
Right.
love.
That's right.
You know?
Yeah, it's like the old not like an old saying, but I hear it a lot. It's like, if you're having the same style of argument over and over, but it's about, like, kitchen counters
Yeah,
or
never really about.
socks on the floor or whatever it is, that's not really what your argument is about, right? It's about some unresolved something deeper that needs to be worked through, and that's only something that I'm really learning recently because I didn't know that cohabitating with somebody would mean so much compromise. And as somebody who is very emotionally or mentally affected by the space around them, like how is my space laid out? How does it look?
Mhm.
It was a hard adjustment to cohabitate with somebody who doesn't really have that same. I think this is a very common thing, especially in like heteronormative relationships, because men tend to be messier, women tend to be tidier. It's just kind of the way, not to generalize, but I think that's pretty common. That was It was a surprise for me how challenging that was for us to compromise on, for me to accept, for him to accept, etc. And as we got further into our relationship, of course, it started to become, well, we don't really want this to be something that like brings down the house. So let's just, how can we just be happy? And
Mhm.
maybe there's socks on the floor sometimes, you know?
Oh, it's interesting that you bring that up. I feel like so, I've had one very long term relationship that I very much consider a marriage, even though we did not
Right.
officially get married for my own personal reasons. My dad was married 7 times, and I just have a little bit of a phobia around marriage.
Right.
But
Right.
we actually were able to work that out because I'm that same way. Like my space is a very strong indicator. My outer space is a very strong indicator of my inner space. And
Right.
so
That's a
if
good way to
I'm
put it.
in a space that is cluttered and that's discombobulated, it'll make me feel cluttered and discombobulated. And he did not have any problem with clutter or discombobulation whatsoever. And so we just had our own separate spaces. I had my room where I could have it exactly the way that I wanted it, and he had his room where he could have it exactly the way he wanted it, and we just sleep over at his room and my room, that we
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
yeah, but we kept it, each one of us had our sacred space because we were meditation teachers, we were running a center,
Right.
and so we were on top of each
Oh,
other
wow, all the time.
all the time. We ran a business together, we lived together, everything. And so we needed to each have spaces where we could go to in order for us to, maintain our own individuality and our own sanity.
Oh my gosh, right.
And
I
so
forgot
we
about that.
shared a space together, a common space together, but we each had a room that was just ours.
Yeah. That is interesting. So that's actually something that my partner suggested this last time we were in therapy when we were discussing logistics and whatnot. He really got to the point of, I don't care about any of the space, like you can do whatever, but I just need a room, right?
Yeah.
Music, drums, computer, whatever, and just don't look in there.
Yeah.
Don't,
Yeah.
if it's gonna bother you, just I'll keep don't.
And that's
And that I think that's a really good compromise. Like if you have the space and you're fortunate enough to have a space for cohabitation and then also like separate areas,
yeah.
absolutely.
Um, so talking about how we tend to be our own worst enemies when it comes to our perception as our reality, right? A lot of times what we hold as truth, we're actually personalizing someone else's experience and we're projecting or something like this, or we're not allowing things to be as they were because they weren't how we wanted them to be. And coming from our formative year upsets and trying to work through that, like I said, one of my challenges is marriage. Like I actually do genuinely have this desire to get married, but I'm terrified of it because my dad was married 7 times. I saw all the craziness that ensued with all that. And so, even when my partner and I were together 7 years and doing all these things, running a business, living together, I wore a ring, everything.
Oh wow.
I still did not look at it as a marriage until just the other night when I was teaching. And someone asked me about the center that I ran in Dallas. And I said, oh, yeah, well, my husband at the time and I, blah, blah. And it was like this internal affirmation and freedom that came around it. Like, yes, it's true. Because I have this story running in my head, like,
Right.
oh, I've never been married. There's something wrong with me and blah, blah. Well, just because
Right.
I haven't been married in the traditional manner, that was still very much a marriage to me.
Absolutely.
And it felt so good to say
100%.
it out loud. I was like,
Yeah.
good for me for giving that voice and validation.
Absolutely. A piece of paper does not make a marriage. That is of one thing I can assure you as
It
somebody
can't
who
break
is
a
married.
marriage.
Yeah, seriously. I I don't think you're wrong about that. I mean, my partner and I waited a really long time to get married. My mom was married 5 times.
Yeah.
I had a lot of concerns around mostly divorce. Like, because in my head, I was like, well, if you get married, then you get
And
divorced.
you
And
get
I don't want to be
divorced. And
divorced.
then it ends really.
I don't want to be divorced.
Yeah.
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 But anyway, we did. And then, yeah, very quickly got divorced. In California, there's a 6-month cooling off period. So if you file for divorce in California, the courts have decided that so many people get back together that they will not file the paperwork until 6 months have gone by. Not like that in Oregon where we lived at the time. So we filed, and then like 3 weeks later they were like, "Okay, here you go." And we were kind of reeling a little bit still, like, I guess we're really doing this cuz we just signed off on it, and then it just kind of became this like robotic thing that had happened. And then, as you know, there was a lot of back and forth and then COVID and stuff like that afterwards. So I fully don't sign on to society's notion that you need to. And honestly, with social media at this point, I think a lot of people have marriages for a lot of the wrong reasons. They have them for show and
Yeah.
look how great my life is
Yeah.
and look how beautiful my fam. Like, I don't.
Idealistic and normal.
Totally. That's a whole social media is a whole episode for me because it's just an outward projection of what you want.
Right.
You're curating what you want other people to see, and I don't think a wedding is any different. So
I agree in a lot of ways. Yeah.
tell me a funny / horror story of a date or boyfriend that you have.
This is my, oh my God, I must be getting punked moment. I mean, this is probably my biggest one because I wish I could have seen my face. This was a relationship that I had before I went off for my meditation training. So I was already in a space where I had gotten enough self-awareness that I wasn't completely going off the deep end with my self-sabotaging behaviors anymore. And so my mom and I had gone out to dinner one night, and this guy who worked at the restaurant, he was the manager, the maitre d' or whatever. He comes over and starts talking to us. And every time we go in, he's like bringing us to the front table and talking to us. And I guess he, thought I was cute or attractive or whatever. And so,
You are.
sure, you have to give your number when you sign in so they can text you and tell you that your table's ready. So he called me several weeks later and asked me out. I went out with him on the first date. This is such a big red flag that I did not get, this whole love bombing thing, right? And he tells me how he wants to get married to me. He's building a house and he wants me to move in with him. He wants us to have a child together. Like
First date.
First date. He's already thought about all of this. And
where did you guys go on the first date?
Huh?
Where did you guys go on this date?
We went out to the Shops of Legacy and went out to like a restaurant out there, and we were just walking around afterwards, and he just all this on me. And my very overly rom-com saturated brain was like, oh, yes, this is exactly the way, this is it. This is how it happened. And so I start going through with this, and a couple months later, we were living together. I'm not even kidding. I
did not think that's where this story was going.
We were living together. My mom like, oh yeah, he's the one, blah, blah. And I mean, anyways, that's a whole other podcast in and of itself.
Wait, can I interrupt you really quick? Was he really building a house?
Yeah, like he really was building a house. He really was legit building a house. And I moved into it with him, and I was about to go off to training. So I was going to be gone for an extended amount of time. So this whole thing only lasted about maybe 8 months total or something like that. I think something like that. But we moved in together, and then all of a sudden, immediately, all these things just started happening that were awful because we didn't even know each other. Like, I made all these things. Like, I can't tell you, he snored banshee. I would be on the top. There was a 3-story house. I would be on the top floor, and I could hear him snoring from the bottom floor. It was awful. So my nervous system's super hypersensitive, so I can't sleep with that. And so I'd have to get up and go get in another bed at night to be able to sleep. And then he would get so upset and all this stuff. So 3 months into just this hell that we created for ourselves, I fall and break my fibula. I was coming out of a yoga class and I fell down the stairs and broke my fibula. So I'm in a cast. My leg is casted and I can't walk, like I'm crawling up the stairs, literally crawling up the stairs. I'm on a knee scooter, doing all the things. We go out to eat. The first night on the knee scooter, he's like walking 3 to 5 feet like in front of me. He won't even be seen with me with the knee scooter because he's so embarrassed. I'm not even kidding. I am not kidding. And so then so much. So my mom comes over one night and he picks me up and carries me up the stairs, right? Like in this whole romantic gesture. The next night when she's not there, I go to crawl up the stairs. Not only does he not carry me, he stands. He'll step one step up and just look at me and wait for me to crawl up. And then he'll step another step and look at me and wait for me to crawl.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God. And so finally we get to the point where we have this discussion about what's going on.
I'm sure.
At which point I'm still in a cast, mind you, so I can't walk. And he breaks up with me for the following reasons. Are you ready for this?
I don't think so.
One, he is wildly over the fact that he has to clean up after me every night when I'm cooking dinner because I'm spilling water all over the floor. I'm cooking on a knee scooter. Do you know how hard it is to not spill anything?
Oh my God.
On a knee scooter? That is reason number one. Reason number two is I had a cat living with me, my cat Mela, and he was very OCD. He walks me through this whole montage that's going on in his head. He's like, this is something I just can't handle anymore. He's like, your cat goes to the bathroom in the litter box, and then she scratches the litter box, and then she walks on the carpet up the stairs and in the bedrooms. You're crawling on the carpet. He's like, you're literally crawling on feces. And then you come get in bed with me, and I just can't handle it. Number 3, which is, in my opinion, just the golden nugget kicker. Mm-hmm. He tells me he thinks I have a personality disorder. I ask him, okay, so why do you think I have a personality disorder? So at this point, I'm working at the bank and I'm in management. So I have a fairly stressful job. And so I'm working from home because I can't walk. And he is working in the restaurant. So he works at night. So he's home during the day. So he's there when I'm working. And he was like, well, you know, when you're around the house and you're not working, you're just this very like childlike rainbows and unicorns, you know, happy and this, that, and the other. He's like, and then when you go to work, you're just so serious and you're so like professional and, you know, you make people do this, that, and the other. And he's like, you're just two totally different people. And he was like,
that's how it works.
I know. And he's like, I'm just like this all the time. He's like, I think that you have a problem. I was like, how the hell do you expect me to run a department on rainbows and unicorns?
Can you imagine? Wow.
Yes.
I wasn't ready for that last one.
Yes. Oh my God.
Can you imagine? No. It's okay. We'll waive all your overdraft fees. Yes, that's fine. I don't need to see your ID. No, it's okay. That's fine. You don't need to sign for anything. Have a great day.
I mean, really? Like, wow.
Wow.
And so we broke up and we never talked again.
Yeah, I bet.
I moved myself out of the house with a broken leg.
Oh my God.
On an e-scooter, crawling, doing all the things.
Wow, Megan. I did not expect that. You're right. That was way better than the other story.
Yeah. I've grown leaps and bounds since then.
Clearly.
I would never find myself in that situation, thankfully.
Of course.
In my life.
That was definitely a rom-coms do exist moment.
Yes.
100%.
A desperate rom-coms. They must exist. I'm already 29. They have to exist.
Were you 29?
Actually, no. I guess I was, how old was I? I guess I was 32.
I see.
Yeah.
I have one. It's not anywhere near that good, but it was a masterclass in expectations, and it provided me years of bartending humor. I still have like friends that will reference it to this day. You may or may not have heard it before. I like on and off kind of dated this guy. Dated is a strong word. It was mostly it's hard to explain. It was kind of like a friends with benefits thing, but it kind of got emotional and there was some room there for like, what's going to happen? Is it going to get serious? But again, being the like, even now, communication is such like a struggle in my adult relationship. So I was 27. So back then it was just like non-existent. Plus I had just got out of the abusive relationship I mentioned earlier. So I was in the height of my self-destructive phase, like just every weekend. Right. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so another like normal, that was like kind of my thing with him. Seems really normal, has a normal job, like whatever. I don't know.
This will make me normal.
But my bar was very low because I just, from again, what the kind of history I had just come from. Anyway, so we drive around a lot. We don't really go on like dates, which is weird, but I'm, again, not great for my self-worth, which is already in the toilet. But I'm like, this guy probably doesn't want to be seen with me. I don't want to be seen with me either. I'm a disaster, you know, like I would just drive around and have sex with me too. That's fine. So that's what we do. It's like the majority of our That's like the majority of our, but we talk a lot and we like each other and we have like actual
How do you
conversations and
like
stuff
switch
like
up
that.
the date? Or you like, do you want to roll the windows down tonight?
Sunroof or no sunroof? What do you think? Let's roll the dice. Yeah, like we both had places. It was just, I don't know. Anyway, so this one night we go up to like this viewpoint and we're at this viewpoint and it's like really pretty. So we're like looking and we're kind of just like walking around by ourselves, like, looking around or whatever. And he's like a foot taller than me. That matters. Oh, and it's like summer. So I'm wearing like a hoodie, shorts, and flip flops. So that also matters to the story. And so nothing's really happened. We're not like physical or anything. We're just kind of up there. It's windy. And all of a sudden we like find ourselves kind of like facing each other, And now my heart rate is like, 190 or whatever. Cause again, expectations. What's going to happen? Like, what are we at? Is it going to be exclusive? Like, is he like, are we going to like drop the L bomb? Like, what's happening? I don't know. And so he's like, by default, kind of looking down at me because I'm 5'6". And so I am looking up and he's kind of like earnestly looking at me, and in my mind, a whole script is happening. I'm like, it is going down, ladies and gentlemen. Like, bring me the oxytocin. Here it comes. Hit me hard. When you just have that feeling like this is the moment.
This is it.
This is it. So I'm looking up and he's looking down. He's like, long pause. Like, Jenny, for such a small girl, you have really big feet.
Oh, no. Did he not read the script? Oh,
no, it's true. It's true. I like blacked out a little bit. I think again, it's just like a masterclass in expectation. Like I had an entire narrative. Rom-coms. Blame rom-coms.
Blame rom-coms. Yeah.
The environment was perfect. It was balmy. It was breezy. Like, come on. You couldn't have put us. We were blocked, the lighting, you know what I mean? Like,
say you have big boobs, so that at least initiated some sort of,
And then for some reason, I was like really embarrassed. Not like he knew my story that was going on up there, but I did. And I was like, oh my God, you've really misjudged this quite badly. And I don't know, I like blabbered something out about, like big feet, big shoulders. I got a weirdly proportioned body. I don't know. Please let me just like dig a grave right here and lay in it and die. Oh my God.
With my big feet sticking.
With my big And I swear, hand to God, to this day, my friends will be like, just some kind of foot joke every now and then. For the record, they're a little big. I'm an 8.5, but in high school, my nickname was Pebbles because I had quote unquote Flintstone feet, which I do. They're like very square toes and then kind of wide and then red hair. So that actually was not the first time I had heard, but it was the first time I had heard it in what I would call a potentially intimate setting.
Okay, so it's actually a thing because in my head I was thinking, because you also have big boobs. So in my head, I was thinking he's actually thinking boobs, and he's like, "Don't say boobs, don't say boobs." And he's like, "Oh, feet."
No, I definitely do. I mean, I don't know. I was wearing flip flops, maybe from way up. Who knows? No idea. But that story brought me so much joy because I bartended for so long. Everyone always loved it. I love that story. I don't really have any like crazy, nothing that doesn't involve like police or anything terrible. But that's always one that I just adore because
that's fantastic.
Yeah, it was a real let's stay present lesson. Like, let's stay here and make sure we know where this is going.
Expectations manageable.
Exactly. All right, well, I've taken so much of your time. You've been so gracious. Thank you so much. It was an absolute delight to talk to you.
Oh, this was so fun.
Yeah, and let's see, how should I close it? I haven't really figured this out yet. Signing off from Bigfoot and Personality Disorder. Be kind to yourself, be kind to others. Don't be afraid to fail. We'll see you next time.